On the day my husband's wet nurse retired to her hometown, I gifted her 1,000 taels of silver, bought a shop for her son, and hired the best tutor in the city for her grandson. My husband chuckled lightly. A dignified marquis's wife, fussing over a milk nurse like this, aren't you afraid of lowering yourself? But she was the wet nurse who had once saved my husband's life. That debt of gratitude, I had to remember. On the day of her departure, I personally saw her out of the city gates. Outside the gates, the wet nurse solemnly bowed to me in a grand salute. Madam's great kindness, this old servant will never forget. If there's a chance, Madam might want to take a look at the secret chamber behind the mural in the Marquis's study. 02 Hearing these words, I froze for a moment, then quickly, it came back to me. A secret chamber, there probably was one. I had once gone to my husband's study and happened to catch him looking flustered, a hanging painting behind him still swaying gently. At the time, I asked him what was wrong. He said he couldn't find something and was rushing around frantically, so I just assumed he'd brushed against the painting while searching and thought nothing more of it. Now, thinking back carefully, he must have been hiding in that damned secret chamber at the time, heard me coming, and hurriedly covered it up. Losing his composure, I trusted him far too much. My husband was the most honest and steady man, sincere in his dealings with others. When people outside spoke of him, no one had a bad word to say. Not a single person ever criticized him. We had been a loving couple for years, the envy of everyone in the capital. How could I ever doubt a man like that? But I also believed the wet nurse. She was a woman of few words, diligent in her work, and even noticed things I overlooked. She would quietly remind me, knowing her place without overstepping. That was why she had been able to stay in the household all these years. My husband's birth mother had died early, and he had treated the wet nurse as a second mother for decades. If it weren't truly serious, she would never have said such a thing to me on her last day. She must have known for a long time, but kept silent for the sake of our family's harmony. Or perhaps, she knew that while she was still here, she could keep an eye on my husband for me. But once she left the estate, she feared whatever was in that secret chamber would eventually become a disaster, so she warned me in advance. Whatever the reason, I had to investigate. Watching the wet nurse's carriage fade into the distance, I turned to my maid, Ching Luo, at my side. Where did the Marquis go today? Has Madam forgotten? Ching Luo hadn't heard what the wet nurse said to me and replied cheerfully, the Marquis went on an outing to the outskirts of the capital with his friends today. Right, how could I forget? He said he had made plans with his friends long ago and couldn't break them, so he couldn't see the wet nurse off outside the city. He even felt a bit guilty and specifically asked me to send her off properly on his behalf. At the time, I didn't think much of it. A prior engagement, it was indeed hard to break. But now, thinking it over carefully, absurd. She had treated him like her own son, and he had treated her like a second mother for decades. How could he not see her off when she was leaving? I wanted to know what appointment was so important that he couldn't delay it by even half an hour behind that secret chamber. There must be a massive secret. Seeing my face darken, Ching Luo dropped her smile and asked cautiously, what's wrong, madam? What's wrong with me? I felt like a fool, deceived by the man who shared my bed for who knows how long, still blindly trusting him, a lie so full of holes. And I hadn't given it a second thought. I just believed him. I didn't say more until I found out the truth. I wouldn't say a word. Let's go. Leaning on Ching Luo's hand, I ordered softly, back to the estate. Since he was out, it gave me the perfect chance to investigate. I wanted to see what kind of secret chamber lay behind that painting. 03, but I never expected that the secret chamber hidden behind the mural was far more than just a secret chamber. When I lifted the painting, a stone door appeared before me. Ching Luo was just as stunned as I was, speechless. I had a hunch, so I reacted faster. Soon, I found a vase that could be turned. Gently twisting it to the side, the stone door let out a dull rumble and slowly opened. Inside was empty, a stone corridor lined with countless everlasting lamps. Holding Ching Luo's hand, I stepped inside. The corridor was vast, but with the lamps lighting the way, it wasn't too eerie. I walked forward step by step, soon emerging from the corridor. Before me lay a small courtyard. The familiar sounds of street vendors outside told me this courtyard was on the same street as the Marquis's estate, so that meant my husband had carved a secret chamber in his own study, dug a tunnel, and connected it to the neighboring yard. This small courtyard was impeccably maintained, with jasmine planted in the flower beds, but not my husband's favorite, He preferred bamboo, and had little fondness for such flowers and plants, so who could have made him plant such a vast stretch of jasmine here? I couldn't be bothered to dwell on it, and strode straight toward the front hall. Qing Luo gasped softly, "Madam, if someone's inside." I didn't care about that anymore. My mind was set on uncovering the truth. The front hall was empty, but a double portrait hung in the center. I recognized the man in it at a glance, my husband, the Marquis of Zhenbei, Xie Linyuan. Below the portrait was his personal seal. I stepped forward and read aloud the words written in Xie Linyuan's own hand above the seal. Though the world boasts 1,000 blooms in every hue, you alone are the one my heart clings to. 04 At Qingluo's startled cry, my gaze slowly shifted to the woman beside Xie Linyuan in the portrait. I didn't recognize the woman in the painting, just rosy lips and fair skin, a neat and tidy appearance. An indescribable suffocation washed over me, as if someone had clamped my throat, making it hard to breathe. My husband, who had shared 10+ years of love and intimacy with me, had actually had his portrait painted with another woman outside. Qing Luo sensed my distress and quickly reached out to rub my back, soothing me. "Madam," once I got past that wave of dizziness, a torrent of nausea hit me. I opened my mouth, wanting to vomit but unable to. It hurt so much. It was Qing Luo who pulled out a sachet filled with mint leaves for me to sniff, and only then did I feel a little better. Lifting my head, I stared with red-rimmed eyes, as if I wanted to etch that portrait into my memory. I don't know how long passed before I suddenly gripped Qing Luo's hand. "Let's go." Following the same path I came from, I returned to the Marquis's mansion. I restored the stone door and murals to their original state. As if I had never set foot in Xie Linyuan's study, Qing Luo hurried out of the mansion with me, not understanding what I was up to, but seething with anger. "Madam, has the Marquis taken a mistress outside? Has he forgotten the vows he made before His Majesty back then? How could he treat you like this?" I said nothing, walking quickly ahead. It wasn't until I reached a small portrait painting stall that I finally stopped. Placing a gold ingot in front of the painter, I said succinctly, "I'll describe. You paint. Money makes the world go round, even without the person present." The painter quickly sketched the woman from the portrait based on my description. I glanced at the image, already about 70 to 80% accurate, rolled it up myself, and turned to leave. This time, I went to the residence of the Grand Princess. The Grand Princess and I had been close friends since childhood, raised together. My father, the Guardian General, had died in battle, and His Majesty, pitying me as an orphan, had me brought into the palace to be raised alongside the Grand Princess. With so many years of friendship, entering the Grand Princess's residence felt like walking into my own home. I didn't even need to announce myself. Barging straight into her boudoir, she was lounging on a soft couch, dozing, and upon hearing it was me, she didn't even bother to open her eyes. Perfect timing. Father just rewarded me with. Before the Grand Princess could finish, I cut her off. "Help me find someone." 05 My voice was different from usual, and the Grand Princess sensed something was off, finally opening her eyes to look at me. "What's wrong?" I unfurled the scroll. Unknown name, unknown origin. Just this portrait, about 70 to 80% accurate. The Grand Princess frowned, unsure of my intentions, but still tilted her chin. A palace maid took the portrait from my hand and turned to leave. The Grand Princess sat up straight and gestured for me to sit down. "Now can you tell me what happened?" With the portrait taken away, the tension that had been lodged in my chest eased slightly, giving me some footing to speak properly. I sat down beside the Grand Princess and dismissed all the maids and attendants from the room. Then, in full detail, I recounted what my wet nurse had said to me today and what I had seen after returning to the Marquis's mansion. It made her so angry that she slammed the small table. How dare he, that bastard Xie Linyuan, actually keeping a mistress outside? Does he think his position is secure now, that he doesn't need to care about you anymore, to pull such a dirty trick? The calm I had just regained was shattered by the Grand Princess's words. I couldn't describe what I was feeling now, except that a single tear fell from the corner of my eye. Feeling the warmth on my cheek, I wiped away the tear and repeatedly told myself to stay calm, but the bitterness in my heart still swept through my entire body, making me tremble uncontrollably. The Grand Princess noticed my distress and ordered a maid to bring a cup of hot tea. She personally patted my back to soothe me, coaxing me into taking a sip of warm tea. Warmth flooded through my body, I gripped the Grand Princess's hand and looked up at her. Thank goodness I wasn't left with nothing. Thank goodness I still had my closest friend by my side steadying myself. I finally spoke. Xie Linyuan betrayed his vows. I'm definitely going to divorce him and cast him out. The Grand Princess understood my meaning and immediately agreed. Don't worry, once I've investigated, I'll report it to father. Not only will you divorce him, but I'll have Xie Linyuan's head chopped off. How dare he bully you? He deserves to die. I didn't want to think about the future just yet. There was something more pressing. Before you find out the truth, please keep this a secret for me. Don't let it get out. Why? The Grand Princess's eyes widened. She looked ready to storm out and broadcast this scandal right now. He wronged you. Even if it's shameful, it's his shame. I shook my head, but I don't want to let Xie Linyuan off easy. Everyone knows how he held on to this position and what benefits he got through me. A heartless bastard doesn't deserve any of it. I want to take it all back. When he has nothing left, I'll divorce him and let everyone know what he did. 06. The Grand Princess agreed to my request. We talked for a while longer, cursing Xie Linyuan a few times to vent, and only then did I return to the Marquis's estate feeling refreshed. Xie Linyuan had come back just before me. When I entered the room, he was having a maid help him change out of his outer robe. Did seeing off the wet nurse take that long? I sat down, poured myself some tea, and sipped it slowly. I had nothing to do, so I stopped by the Grand Princess's mansion. Xie Linyuan didn't say anything. He knew the Grand Princess and I were close. Instead, he brought up the wet nurse. You really went overboard. Seeing her off was already a favor. Why did you give her so much? 1,000 taels wasn't enough. I heard you even allocated a shop a few days ago. I'd only said I wanted to prepare a generous gift without telling Xie Linyuan what it was. Some steward must have spilled the beans today. For years, Xie Linyuan had personally managed the Marquis's accounts. Though I was the Marchioness and ran the inner household, I had no real control over the finances. I had to ask Xie Linyuan for every expense. If it weren't for the wet nurse's high status in the household and the steward being present when I mentioned the generous gift a few days ago, I probably wouldn't have been able to get even that 1,000 taels and one shop. I kept my expression calm, lowering my eyes as if teasing him. The wet nurse has taken care of you for years and even saved your life. Why are you being so stingy, Marquis? Can't bear to spend a little silver. Xie Linyuan wasn't a stingy man by nature. Even if he really was reluctant, the gifts had already been sent out. For the sake of his pride, he wouldn't say anything. Sure enough, as soon as I said that, he laughed and came over to put an arm around my shoulder. What are you saying, my lady? It's not about the silver. But the wet nurse is just a servant. I'm afraid she can't handle such a grand gift from you. Besides, I'm not being stingy, I'm jealous. You're so good to an outsider, but when do you ever spoil me? Like this. 07. I sneered inwardly. I was an orphan. What dowry could I have brought into the Marquis's estate? My father died on the battlefield. The treasury was empty back then. Everything from the general's mansion, including my mother's dowry, was seized by my father for military use. I had nothing left. If His Majesty hadn't pitied me and allocated 188 loads of dowry for my wedding, my marriage ceremony would have been pathetically shabby. But once those 188 loads of dowry entered the Marquis's estate, they became Xie Linyuan's property. He said we were one as husband and wife, and since I'd never learned household management from my mother, it was better for him to handle it. So, it all went into the treasury, and I never saw it again. Over the years, Xie Linyuan hadn't treated me badly. My food, clothing, and daily expenses were no different from when I was in the palace. I just lost the freedom to control the money. I never cared much about it anyway. Besides, with the silver in Xie Linyuan's hands, he managed it well, opening several shops and taverns. I once overheard a steward reporting to him that the Marquis's estate's assets had multiplied several times over since I married in. I was perfectly content with that life. But now, hearing Xie Linyuan's words, I only felt disgust. I turned to look at him, meeting his gaze. I wanted to surprise you, my lord, but if I withdraw silver from the accounts, you'd find out right away. Where's the surprise in that? Xie Linyuan's smiling expression faltered for a moment, whether from embarrassment or something else, but after a pause, he quickly broke into a grin again. Don't say that, my lady. Managing accounts is exhausting. I wouldn't dream of putting you through that. I'd rather forego the surprise. Oh, by the way, he seemed unable to continue fabricating the story, or perhaps he just didn't want me to dwell on this topic any longer. His tone hurried as he brought up another matter. Next month is father's birthday. I'll have to trouble you, my lady, to handle the arrangements. As for the expenses, feel free to draw whatever you need. 08 next month. I did the math in my head. It should be enough time, so I agreed readily and began preparing for the birthday banquet. When the eldest princess saw me bustling about like this, she was quite displeased. You're about to divorce him, so why bother with the Marquis's messy affairs? Xie Yuan's father isn't worth a damn anyway. Why waste your effort throwing him a birthday banquet? As the eldest princess said, Xie Yuan's father, the old Zhenbei Marquis, was indeed worthless back then. He was caught embezzling and taking bribes. Once exposed, he nearly lost his title as Zhenbei Marquis if it weren't for Xie Yuan marrying me, and His Majesty showing mercy by allowing Xie Yuan to inherit the title, only stripping the old man of his status, confiscating his assets for the treasury, and sparing his head. He wouldn't be enjoying such a comfortable life with a birthday banquet today, but I didn't care about that. Don't you think, eldest princess, that exposing Xie Yuan's true face at the birthday banquet would be quite amusing? Xie Yuan's business was thriving, and he was in His Majesty's good graces. The old Zhenbei Marquis's scandal was long buried, and Xie Yuan had a decent reputation. Many court officials were happy to associate with him at the Marquis's birthday banquet. Few would come for the old Zhenbei Marquis's sake, most would be there for Xie Yuan. Exposing Xie Yuan's deeds at that moment would be incredibly entertaining. The eldest princess finally caught on to my plan and couldn't help but laugh. That's a clever idea. Oh, by the way, I came today specifically to give you something good. She handed me a sealed letter, the investigation results I had requested. The woman in the portrait was a royal from the western regions. She had fled to the Central Plains after committing a crime, living under an assumed identity. After meeting Xie Yuan, he personally renamed her Xie. The house next door was purchased under the pretense of being for a distant cousin, using the Marquis's funds, but registered in Xie Wan's name now. The two of them had been living there for 12 years. 12 years. I had been married to Xie Yuan for only 12 years. Within 6 months of our wedding, he met Xie, bought her a house, and settled her right next to the Marquis's residence. Every day, he used that secret passage to visit his mistress. No wonder he didn't dare tell me about this. He had sworn before His Majesty to be with only one woman for life, to have only me as his wife, and never to take a concubine. Within 6 months, he found someone else, a fugitive royal from the western regions. This was a crime punishable by beheading. How could Xie Yuan dare to tell me? 09 My hands trembled as I gripped the letter. After a long moment, I finally heard my own voice speak the first words. I have one more favor to ask, eldest princess. Please grant it. Over the years, I had rarely addressed her as eldest princess, usually calling her by her childhood name. The eldest princess knew this matter must be serious, but she never expected me to ask her to spread the news that she was marrying off her daughter. A princess's wedding didn't require His Majesty's decree. It could be arranged by her birth mother, the eldest princess. Even if it seemed reckless, no one could criticize it later. The eldest princess agreed and soon spread the word that she had found a suitable family and was betrothing the young princess to them. I went home and cheerfully told Xie Yuan the news. I said, I've already agreed with the eldest princess. I'll transfer all 188 loads of dowry that His Majesty bestowed upon me to the young princess as a gift from me, her godmother. Xie Yuan's face instantly changed. What did you say? I pretended to be startled by his reaction. What's wrong, Marquis? His Majesty showed me great kindness. Now I'm repaying that kindness to his granddaughter. Is that not right? Xie Yuan opened his mouth as if to say something, but in the end, nothing came out. He just clenched his jaw and forced the words out through gritted teeth. But if you give away all your dowry to the princess, what about our Yaro's dowry when she marries? I smiled coyly. I know how well you've managed our household over the years, Marquis. Even without my capital, the money you've earned should be enough for Yaro's dowry. I trust you won't shortchange our daughter, right? Xie Yuan nearly choked on his breath. I knew he would agree. He cared so much about saving face, especially since it involved the eldest princess, a member of the imperial family. If he dared to say no, he wouldn't live to see the sun tomorrow. 10 He did agree, but then brought up another matter. By the way, my lady, have you ever been to my study? My hand, holding the tea, paused for a moment before I quickly feigned confusion. Of course I have. Didn't I just bring you soup there yesterday? Seeing that I didn't understand what he meant, Xie Linyuan had to spell it out more clearly. I mean, while I was away from the residence, did the madam ever go there? I didn't know if I'd left some clue that day that got discovered, but on this question, I was absolutely not going to admit a thing, so I broke into a smile. What kind of talk is that, Marquis? You know, I'm not fond of dabbling in literature or calligraphy. If you're not in the study, what business would I have there? Xie Linyuan fell silent for a moment. Yes, he knew, my father was a military general, and I took after his nature, never cared for poetry or books since I was little. Otherwise, how could I not even read account books? The control of the household finances wouldn't have fallen into Xie Linyuan's hands either. Then I pressed further. What's wrong, Marquis? Did something go missing from the study? Xie Linyuan draped an arm over my shoulder, forcing a faint smile. Yes, a painting scroll went missing. It was meant to be a gift for you, but I couldn't find it anywhere today. His closeness made me nauseous. I wanted to pull away but couldn't find a good excuse, my whole body stiffening as I replied dryly, for no reason, Marquis. Why would you give me a gift? Xie Linyuan glanced at me, feigning reproach. It's all because of you, madam. You run off to the eldest princess's residence every day, leaving your husband neglected. So I had to think of a way to win back your favor. Sourness churned in my stomach, and I had to hold it in with all my might to avoid throwing up in front of him. Marquis, saying such things isn't embarrassing. If someone overhears, I won't know how to face anyone. Xie Linyuan was about to say more, but I quickly made an excuse to go tally my dowry for delivery to the eldest princess. I caught the flash of anger that flickered across his face before I left. Satisfied. 188 loads of dowry, the same way they were carried from the palace into the Marquis's residence back then. Now they were carried from the Marquis's residence into the eldest princess's. This was his starting capital, so naturally, it had to be the first thing he lost after that. I'd make him lose everything he gained later. One by one, Xie Linyuan had earned enough. This 188 loads of dowry meant little to him now, though it pained him. He gave it up fairly readily. 11 Afterward, I asked the eldest princess to petition for an imperial decree. Making money through trade was true, but among scholars, farmers, artisans, and merchants were the lowest. Especially for a marquis to engage in commerce, it was downright disgraceful. No one had criticized Xie Linyuan back then because he had a disgraced father. Everyone knew the Zhenbei Marquis's residence was just an empty title. The Zhenbei Marquis would never enter the court, so no one said much about his business dealings. Who would have thought that later, thanks to my connections, Xie Linyuan would gain favor with the emperor and even step into the court? Now, never mind what others thought, Xie Linyuan himself was deeply unsettled. He wanted to shed the identity of a merchant but couldn't resist the temptation of all that money. The best way out was to become an imperial merchant. That was what I asked the eldest princess for. The palace's treasury needed a batch of goldware, but the court artisans were short-handed, so they sought capable private merchants to take on the job. If done well, they could sign a contract with the treasury and become a bona fide imperial merchant. This was the opportunity Xie Linyuan had waited years for. Naturally, he had to seize it, but the palace's demands were overwhelming. Xie Linyuan's businesses didn't include gold or jewelry, so he had to drain all his existing silver notes to buy a large batch of gold and purchase a goldsmith shop at a high price to craft the ware. His taverns and remaining shops still needed to run daily operations. To fund his climb, he didn't even pay his staff's wages for this month. But for now, this wouldn't cause an uproar. Everyone knew Xie Linyuan's ambitions and that he was a man of his word. It was just 1 month's unpaid wages. Once his grand plan succeeded and he became an imperial merchant, wouldn't there be raises to look forward to? I sat in the tavern, listening to the crowd discuss Xie Linyuan's impending rise to imperial merchant, and slowly let a smile spread across my face. You all think it's a done deal. I don't. 12 I went next door and, while Xie Linyuan was busy with the treasury order, sought out Xie Wn in person. The moment she saw me, Xie Wn was terrified. She never expected the person stepping out of the secret passage to be me. Not Xie Linyuan. The shears she'd been using to trim jasmine flowers clattered to the floor. Xie Wn stared at me blankly, unable to snap out of it for a long while. I stopped at the secret passage exit and smiled at her. I always said the Marquis didn't like jasmine, so why would he grow this whole patch here? Turns out it's because you like it, miss. Xie Wn finally came to her senses, scrambling to lift her skirt and kneel. Madam, spare me, I never meant to contend with you for anything. I really. She was so flustered she didn't know what to say. It's fine, I'll speak for her. I helped her up, finishing the words she couldn't bring herself to say. Of course you were never truly with Xie Linyuan, because you're a princess of the western regions. Your father committed a crime and was sentenced to death. Before he died, he secretly sent you away. You came to the Central Plains, alone and helpless. Xie Linyuan appeared just then. You thought he was your lifelong anchor. You stayed with him, but soon discovered he already had a family, a wife, the orphaned daughter of a meritorious official. By then, you'd learned some of the Central Plains rules. You knew this was a crime punishable by beheading. You wanted to leave Xie Linyuan, but when you brought it up, he threatened you with the fact that you were a criminal's daughter who had fled to the Central Plains. He said if you dared leave him or spread the word, he'd send you back to the western regions or hand you over to the emperor. Either way, you'd die. You didn't dare, because you were carrying his child. You didn't want to die, and you couldn't bear to let your child die either, so you endured it. One endurance became over a decade. I smiled at her and handed over a sealed letter. The trap Xie Linyuan set for you, I've already found its weak point. The dagger to cut this net is in your hands. Would the lady be willing to go with me? Xie Wn unfolded the letter. It was the secret I'd asked the Grand Princess to investigate, the hidden truth behind the Western Region's royal family's crime. Back then, the Western Region's royal family already knew she was alive. They had also overturned her father's case. If she returned, she would be the exalted princess of the Western Regions. Xie Wan's eyes brimmed with tears as she clutched the letter tightly. The chance to break free from her cage was right before her. 13. But Xie Wn didn't dare. Tears streaming, her hands trembling as she gripped the letter, she said, but fleeing to the Central Plains is a death sentence. If I turn against Xie Linyuan and he reports this to the emperor, I'll still die. Madam, I beg you, I have a child. I can't die. If I die, what will become of my son? She grabbed my hand desperately, falling to her knees before me. You won't die, I said calmly, handing her another letter. This is a pass I obtained from the emperor. His Majesty has pardoned your crime and permits you to leave the Central Plains. As long as you publicly expose Xie Linyuan's true face with me, I guarantee your safety. Your child can leave with you too. Xie Wn flipped through both letters again and again, finally relenting and agreeing to my plan. I slowly pulled my hand away. Don't blame me, miss, we're not close. And to ensure you don't go back on your word, I've already had people watching this courtyard. If you tip off Xie Linyuan about my plan ahead of time, the officers of the capital magistrate's office will come to settle the score for your escape to the Central Plains. A smart person knows how to choose, but I really didn't know Xie Wn well. What if she was that 1 in 100 fool? My plan could not be ruined, so, even if I had to play the villain, I'd leave a threat behind. Xie Wn was startled by me, her face instantly paling a few shades. Her lips quivered as she was about to say something. Qingluo ran out from the secret passage behind me, grabbing my arm. Madam, hurry, the Marquis is back. I gave Xie Wn one last look, too rushed to say more, and turned to follow Qingluo into the passage. 14. It was clear Xie Linyuan couldn't let go of his worries. The moment he returned to the mansion, he rushed straight to the study. Whether he was eager to see Xie Wn or worried I might dig through his study, I didn't know. Either way, by the time I came out of the secret passage, Xie Linyuan was already outside the study door. There was no time to leave. I had to calmly start rifling through Xie Linyuan's things. When he burst in, he saw Qingluo looking slightly flustered and me standing in front of his bookshelf, searching for something. Madam, Xie Linyuan said in a low voice, what are you doing? I turned around, pressing a hand to my chest as if startled. When did you return, husband? You scared me. Xie Linyuan didn't answer. He just stared at me with a dark expression, and at the mural not far from me I'd used the last moments to steady that painting. It still hung quietly on the wall. Just as when I'd arrived, as if untouched, I knew I'd left no trace, so I started to pout. It's all your fault. Last time you said you'd prepare a gift for me, and I've been thinking about it. 4 nights on end, unable to sleep. Why would you suddenly give me a gift? I had to check, maybe you're using the gift as an excuse to hide some lady's portrait in this study, afraid I'd find out. So you're tricking me. Xie Linyuan pulled his gaze away from the mural and let out a soft laugh. He walked slowly toward me and wrapped an arm around my shoulder. So, madam, did you find anything? The familiar scent of pine wood lingered around the tip of my nose. Once, this smell brought me comfort. Now, it only made me sick. I pushed him back with my hand, unwilling to get too close to Xie Linyuan, and used the gesture to keep up the act. You still have the nerve to say that. Weren't you going to prepare a gift for me? Where is it? I spread my palm open, making a show of demanding a gift from Xie Linyuan. He laughed, placing his hand in mine and clasping it tightly. My lady, please spare me. You know how busy I've been lately. How about I make up for the gift once the big matter is settled? I snorted, pulling my hand back and turning to leave. I knew you were lying to me. Is there some girl hiding in this room? I made as if to search again, but Xie Linyuan caught me by the waist. His laughter carried a hint of helplessness. All right, my lady, no more fussing. Where would I find the time for someone else? Besides, I once promised you a lifetime with just the 2 of us. How could I possibly look elsewhere? A fine promise, a lifetime with just the 2 of us. I stopped moving and closed my eyes. Xie Linyuan, I hope you remember those words when the time comes. 15 On the day of the old Junbei Marquis's birthday banquet, it was also the day Xie Linyuan delivered his order. He had poured everything into it, hiring every craftsman in the city to forge goldware. Finally managing to deliver the order from the imperial treasury within a month, it coincided with his father's birthday feast. Now, all that was left was for the inspection to pass and the imperial decree naming him a royal merchant to arrive from the palace. Then he would have a double blessing. Xie Linyuan laughed and chatted with the crowd at the banquet, raising his cup in hearty toasts. Xie Wn was led by me as we walked out from the small courtyard's main gate and over to the next door, the main gate of the Marquis's residence. Together, we stepped over the threshold and headed toward the bustling crowd. Our appearance made the front hall of the Marquis's residence, once filled with lively guests, suddenly fall silent. Following the guests' gazes, Xie Linyuan looked in our direction with just one glance, his pupils abruptly constricted, as if he had seen something he shouldn't have. I understood perfectly what he was feeling at that moment. If it were me, I'd probably react the same way. Yes, the legitimate wife and the long-hidden mistress appearing together, hand in hand. Aside from the truth coming to light, Xie Linyuan could think of no other possibility. What terrified him even more was that among today's guests was a very important figure. It was the emperor's son, the Grand Princess's younger brother, the current crown prince. The crown prince had also heard with his own ears how Xie Linyuan had promised a lifetime with just one person. Now, seeing with his own eyes his betrayal of me, he was so furious he couldn't stop sneering. Xie Linyuan's mouth hung slightly open. Even as we walked up and stood before him, he still couldn't snap out of it. Xie Wn had already slapped him across the face. Bastard, it's all your fault, making me live as a hidden mistress for so many years. Do you know how guilty I felt hearing outsiders describe how harmonious you and the Marchioness were? I've lived in that guilt for 11 whole years. I never wanted to be this shameless villain. She spat fiercely at Xie Linyuan, then turned to leave, but that bastard Xie Linyuan actually stopped her. Wana, listen to me explain. Explain what? Xie Wn slammed her head hard into his, and while he was wincing in pain, she shook off his grip. Explain how you betrayed your wife, how you cheated behind her back for 12 years. The one you need to explain to isn't me, it's your wife. And also, my name is Aigul, not Xie Wn. Don't show me that disgusting face of yours. Xie Wn, no, now she should be called Aigul. Finally stomped hard on Xie Linyuan's foot, clutched the letter tightly in her hand, and sprinted out. 16 She took her son and mounted the horses. I had prepared for her. Only after Aigul had completely disappeared from sight did Xie Linyuan finally remember me. He turned to look at me slowly, only to find me standing there, smiling faintly at him, as if I wasn't angry at all. The front hall was so quiet that even the sound of Xie Linyuan's shoes hitting the ground as he walked toward me step by step was clearly audible. My lady. He opened his mouth but didn't know what to say. I was still smiling as I brought my hidden hand out from behind my back. Only then did everyone notice that I was holding a bright yellow imperial decree. Some courtiers with sharp eyes had already knelt down. Xie Linyuan was still frozen in place. I held the decree with both hands and walked toward the crown prince. Your Highness, may I trouble you to read this imperial decree aloud? Of course. The crown prince didn't hesitate, taking the decree and unrolling it. I smoothed my robes and knelt gracefully. After reading just 2 lines, the crown prince glanced at Xie Linyuan, the only one still standing. Marquis Junbei, with an imperial decree before you, you still refuse to kneel. Are you planning to rebel? Xie Linyuan's legs gave way, and only then did he realize what he had done. Hastily dropping to his knees, his wretched appearance before my eyes filled me with an immense sense of relief. The crown prince had already begun reading the imperial decree aloud. By the grace of our marriage bestowals, we aim to honor the loyal, foster harmony among ministers, and hope for happy unions. Previously, we issued a special edict. Now, we hereby revoke that command and annul the previously bestowed betrothal. Xie Linyuan, Marquis of Junbei, for violating his oath, is stripped of his official post. His noble rank and titles are abolished, and he is reduced to a commoner to reflect on his faults. The decree was closed, and the crown prince looked down at Xie Linyuan from on high. Xie Linyuan, accept the decree. I was still smiling. I had originally intended to divorce him, but His Majesty said that since he had arranged the marriage, he would handle the dissolution as well, and publicly strip Xie Linyuan of his official rank and title before the court. That, he said, would be his way of venting my anger. That was fine. I was afraid that if I divorced him myself, I wouldn't make enough of a scene to utterly humiliate Xie Linyuan. With His Majesty stepping in, I was more than happy to accept, and I wanted to see what expression Xie Linyuan would wear when he lost the title of Marquis of Junbei, which he had only gained by marrying me. 17. But I was disappointed. Xie Linyuan had no expression. He just knelt there, dazed, not even reaching for the decree. His eyes were hollow, as if he had become a puppet. The crown prince couldn't be bothered with him. He placed the decree on Xie Linyuan's head and reached out his hand to me. Sister Wn, get up quickly. Thank you, Your Highness. I offered my hand, and the crown prince personally helped me to my feet. He walked out with me, side by side. I'll send someone to pack your things later. What are your plans from now on? Will you return to the general's mansion, or go to the princess's residence? You could also come back to the palace. Your old residence, Changle Palace, is still empty. The crown prince chattered on, just like when he was a child chasing after me and the eldest princess. I couldn't help but smile. Thank you for your concern, Your Highness. His Majesty has already bestowed a residence upon me, right next to the eldest princess's mansion. The crown prince pouted. Sister Wn, why must you be so formal with me? We grew up together. When you were married, we couldn't interact much, but from now on, we must visit each other often. We can't lose the bond we've had. He glanced back at the lonely figure still kneeling there, his disgust barely concealed. Such a scumbag. It's good that Sister Wn discovered it early and left. What a shame, all those years of your youth wasted on that filthy thing. I also looked back after my father died in battle. My mother followed him. I had no home, even with His Majesty's care. I knew it wasn't my true sanctuary when I married Xie Linyuan. I thought I finally had a home of my own, but in the end, it all came to nothing. This place, which had deceived me for 12 years. And the man who had deceived me for 12 years, farewell. I will have my own home. I will. 18. After I left, Xie Linyuan received a second imperial decree. This one came from the imperial treasury. It harshly condemned the goods he had submitted as shoddy and substandard, stating that he would never be hired by the treasury again. The goldware was confiscated in the palace. All that was left for Xie Linyuan was a shattered dream of being a royal merchant and a pile of unpaid wages owed to the craftsmen and servants. I heard he knelt in the front hall, dazed, for an entire day. It wasn't until the palace staff sent to pack my things arrived that he snapped out of it, frantically trying to stop them from moving my belongings. But the crown prince had sent not only eunuchs but also guards. When they drew their gleaming blades, Xie Linyuan dared not move. He could only watch helplessly as my things were carried away. Hordes of craftsmen, hearing that he was finished, began flooding into the Marquis's mansion, demanding their wages. But Xie Linyuan couldn't produce a single silver tael. He sold his tavern, sold his shop, barely managing to plug the hole left by the craftsmen's wages. Xie Linyuan married me, and he gained money, power, shops, and a tavern. Then he lost me, and he lost his power, his money, his shops, and his tavern. He tried to find our daughter, Yao Yao, only to discover that I had already sent her to the eldest princess's mansion, where he could no longer reach her. Thinking of the eldest princess's mansion, Xie Linyuan remembered the 188 loads of dowry I had sent there. He had nothing left. He couldn't lose that dowry too, so he went to the eldest princess's mansion. He knelt outside the gate, begging and pleading, asking the princess to return the dowry I had sent over. He said it was the memory he shared with his wife. The eldest princess was so furious she almost went out with a blade to chop off his head. I stopped her. 19, I said, "Let me handle it," but I didn't take a knife. I walked out myself. I stood before Xie Linyuan and spoke softly. Actually, the eldest princess never intended to marry off the commandery princess. Xie Linyuan lifted his head to look at me. As if he couldn't quite understand what I was saying, I tugged at the corner of my mouth, forcing a bitter, ironic smile. The princess is still young. How could the grand princess possibly let her marry? I had the grand princess spread this rumor just to reclaim those 188 dowry chests. Do you know why I went through all this trouble, Xie Linyuan? I calculated it. To pay the craftsmen, you'd have to sell the restaurant, sell the shops, and still have about 500 taels left in the accounts. Originally, if you scrimped, that would last you the rest of your life, but I spent it all on your father's birthday banquet. Didn't you notice how extravagant it was this time? I left you not a single coin, so you'd naturally cling to this last hope, but that hope shattered right before your eyes. How does it feel, Xie Linyuan? This is my revenge. Do you like it, bitch? Xie Linyuan finally spoke, his voice hoarse, perhaps from all the strain these past days. Why are you so cruel? I only took a concubine. Which man doesn't have 3 wives and 4 concubines? Why should I have to stay faithful to you for life? I didn't even bring her in front of you. Wasn't that enough? I gave you all the face you needed. Wasn't that enough? Why did you have to destroy me? Xie Linyuan was pinned down by the grand princess's guards, but he kept struggling desperately. He screamed at the top of his lungs, and if his voice could turn into blades, it would have already pierced me through 1,000 times. I never demanded you couldn't have multiple wives. I stared at him expressionlessly. It was you who promised the emperor. It was you who begged the emperor to marry me, just to keep your father's title as Marquis of Zhonbei and to cling to power. 20. From the very start, your motives were impure. You married me only because you knew I was an orphan from the general's mansion, that the emperor cherished me. By marrying me, you could reclaim your former status. You used the gifts the emperor bestowed on me to build your wealth, and all these years, you've acted like I was eating your food and using your money. But Xie Linyuan, have you ever thought that without me, you would have been nothing from the start? You think I didn't know about your dirty little schemes? No, I knew your intentions weren't pure. But as long as you treated me well, as long as you kept your promises, I could pretend not to know. A life like that, plain and simple, was good enough for me. I never chased after true love, but you shouldn't have lied to me. The most crucial point is, when you had nothing, you could act like a decent man, but once you had everything, you forgot your roots. Look at what you've done. Are those the acts of a human? That was imprisonment. Do you understand? A perfectly good girl, locked away by you for 12 years. And we, how innocent were we, to be deceived and imprisoned by you like this? When you question why others treat you this way, why don't you first ask yourself why you treat others like this? If I hadn't exposed you, were you planning to live like this forever? One at home, one outside, balancing both. You've had it pretty good, haven't you? This was the first time I lost control of my emotions in front of outsiders. Outside the Grand Princess's mansion was a bustling street, and most people had heard of the former Marquis of Zhonbei, Xie Linyuan. Now, hearing me curse him like this, some who couldn't stand it started throwing eggs and rotten vegetable leaves at Xie Linyuan. He had never suffered such humiliation. Dodging, he cursed the crowd. How dare you? Do you know who I am? Who are you? Before the crowd could answer, I coldly demanded, the former Marquis of Zhonbei, or the once wealthy man. Now you're nothing, no money, no status. The emperor has taken it all back. You're just a commoner with nothing. Xie Linyuan, dream too much, and one day it all shatters. You wanted to enjoy the bliss of multiple wives for a lifetime, but did you ever think you deserved that fortune? You didn't even see off your wet nurse, who raised you, treated you like a half-mother, and once saved your life. Even the generous gift I gave her, you thought was too much. A man who doesn't remember kindness, does he really deserve all the good things he had? Xie Linyuan's struggles stopped. His eyes moved sluggishly as he finally understood everything. So you really did go into my study. It wasn't my imagination, it was the wet nurse. She told you. I couldn't be bothered to look at him again, let alone give him a definite answer. I just casually dropped a jade pendant and turned to walk into the Grand Princess's mansion 21. The Grand Princess handed me several deeds. I bought those restaurants and shops as you wished. I thanked the Grand Princess. The gold vessels Xie Linyuan sent to the palace, His Majesty kept none of them and bestowed them all to me, along with that dowry of 188 loads. The Grand Princess also returned every single piece to me without a single item missing. Now, I possess all the wealth Xie Linyuan had painstakingly amassed over the years, enough to live without worry about food or clothing, even if I have no head for business. This fortune is more than sufficient for me and Yao Yao to live well. The jade pendant I dropped was the Xie family's heirloom. Before Xie Linyuan could pick it up, a beggar nearby snatched it away. He tried to fight for it, but how could a man who had lived in luxury for years out-wrestle a beggar who had spent years sleeping on the streets? He was quickly kicked aside, his head smashing against a stone, and he passed out cold. So many people on the street, yet no one reached out a hand to help him. Xie Linyuan was in too much pain to even crawl, blood still streaming from his head. That night, a heavy rain poured down outside. The next morning, a passing night watchman found him dead. The blood beneath his head had been washed clean by the rain. His cold corpse lay by the roadside, with stray dogs gnawing at his hand. When I heard this news, I felt a pang of worry. I feared my daughter Yao Yao would be sad. I also feared she would know that the jade pendant was deliberately dropped by me, the final act of revenge against Xie Linyuan, and think I was a cruel mother. But she was clearly more open-minded than I was. Mother, this is karma. He did wrong, so he deserves punishment. Let's not dwell on it. The days ahead are bright and radiant. Yes, the days ahead are bright and radiant.